And in the same way, if you want to move Shakti energy from the pelvic floor, bring your attention and energy to the pelvic floor. So this is a complicated post that you guys have sent to me. I do appreciate it, but I've had a little brief flick through, and yeah, there's some complex terms in here. So I'm going to do my best to narrate this and add detail where appropriate. So transmutation, the Crism oil. This is a subject that you have asked me to cover extensively in the past before. The real path of what we're doing here when we're learning alchemy. The body becomes lean, strong, and healthy. Too much fat is reduced. There is luster in the face. Eyes sparkle like diamonds. The practitioner becomes very handsome. Voice becomes sweet and melodious. The inner anahata sounds are distinctly heard. The student is then free from all sorts of diseases. He gets established in brahmacharya. Sexual energy is firm and steady. The gastric fire is augmented. The student becomes so perfected in brahmacharya that his mind will not even be shaken, even if a fairy tries to embrace him. And this is from Sivananda, so whether or not he's speaking to literal fairies, perhaps it's the fairies in the female or feminine sense. Appetite becomes keen. Nadis are purified. Vikshepa is removed and the mind becomes one-pointed. Rajas and tamas are destroyed. The mind is prepped. The excretions become scanty. Steady practice arouses the inner spiritual force and brings light, spiritual light, happiness and peace of mind. All psychic powers are obtained. Advanced students will only get all the benefits. And this is an excerpt from Kundalini Yoga, Swami Sivananda, on the practice of Kundalini, awakening the brain through cultivation of Shakti energy, using sexual alchemy, understanding of the nerve plexuses and the ganglions that storehouse prana or energy, and awakening dormant centers in the mind through leveraging things like pranayama, so moving the prana through breath, control of breath, and restraint of breath. I'll just read this particular excerpt here on Kundalini awakening dormant centers in the brain. It's a little bit difficult to read. So as Kundalini energy rises through the Sushumna, which is a central channel, which runs parallel to the Ida and the Pingala, the masculine and feminine parts of the nervous system or the nadis, the energy flows from the ras and thalamus to the cortex and awakens dormant, underactive parts of the brain, especially in the frontal lobes. The whole brain now begins to pulse as a unit, generating coherent, high amplitude brain waves within all frequency bands. Maximum amplitude will usually be in the alpha band. However, fast EEG activity in the beta and gamma bands will be strongly increased in the frontal areas. So we know that Kundalini, Shakti energy is moving up the Sushumna. In a more scientific lens, you can perhaps draw correlations towards the CSF flushing the third ventricle and creating intrathecal force on the pineal gland, which has crystals on it. When that intrathecal force is placed, there is a piezoelectrical effect on the gland, which starts to release metabolites, melatonin, DMT, high spiritual and psychedelic-like trances and experiences. There's a cliff note here. Do not try to awaken anything. Simply continue with SR and true self-improvement. You know what is bad for you and you will drop it. Perhaps a little bit naive here. I don't necessarily believe it is only through continence that you can achieve higher states of consciousness, but it is through practices of yoga. And I mean yoga in the holistic sense. I don't mean just doing asanas like downward dog. I mean you're using pranayama, you're using mudras for the mind, mantras, which are a kind of asana for the mind. And essentially you're practicing presence, you're practicing control of breath, control of the body, control of the nervous system by unifying mind and body. That is actually the definition of yoga. Yoga means union of mind and body. And one of the mechanisms of unifying these two phenomenal technologies we have with body and mind is breath, is using pranayama to create unification between the conscious and the unconscious, the conscious being the logical mind and the unconscious being the body. How can we activate the autonomic nervous system? Through the breath. Well, Wim Hof has shown us through breath we can actually access parts of the nervous system which otherwise scientists believe to be on autopilot. We know there are yogis who develop siddhis, which are superpowers in the more Western lexicon or Western vernacular. And these siddhis stem to controlling temperature. They stem to even controlling temperature in different parts of the hand. They correlate to being able to stop and start the heart at will. And by the way, all these things scientifically documented. There's studies that show individuals have that kind of power over the mind and over the body. So there's some credence to it. A really good book to read is Dean Radin's Supernormal, a Western scientist who is into things like manifestation, powers beyond the known and more occult powers. And there's a lot of rationale backing up a lot of these. But back to the chrism here. So when the oil, the anointment, the Christ is crucified, to crucify means to increase a power 1,000-fold, not to kill. It remains 2 days and a half, the moon's period in your star sign. In the tomb, which is the cerebellum, on the third day, this ascends to the pineal gland that connects the cerebellum with the optic thalamus, the central eye, the throne of God, the crystal palace, the cave of Brahman. Many different ways to describe this. The third eye. The central eye and the throne of God is the chamber overtopped by the hollow or the hallowed caused by the curve of the cerebellum, or the cerebrum, pardon me. The most high of the body, which is the temple of the living God. The living vital substance, which is a precipitation of the breath of life, breathed into man, therefore the holy, whole ghost or breath. The oil is created in the grey matter of your brain and flows down to the spine to become the sexual fluid. Your job is to return 10% back to the head. That is the prodigal son returning back home. It is the all highly mystical. That is the resurrection. A little cliff note to the user manual of the body that everybody's very naive in. So the seed of Eve can bruise the head of the serpent because it can be lifted up the tree of knowledge to the Libra, to Aries, under the control of the mind in meditation. This is the same as the spinal axis from Scorpio to Taurus. Scorpio is at the base of the spine and the Taurus is at the head. Many other symbolic iconographies of the snake, Kundalini, symbolic for sexual energy, rising up, which gets snatched by the eagle. There's wings, or seemingly wings, at the top of the caduceus, which correspond to anatomical structures in the brain as well. In order to raise Kundalini, you have to overcome the 5 senses, and you have to have oil in your lamp. That is the chrism. You must not waste this oil through sexual gratification. You must reach the state of no thought, that is virgin consciousness, the stain of no thought. It does you no good to enter into meditation if you have no oil, or Jesus says, I never knew you. You must save 10% to teeth to the brain. That's the 5 wise virgins. I will concede here some of this particular symbolic analogies are a little bit unfamiliar with me. The flaming sword of the cherubim at the east Aries is the power of will in the brain. Aries rules the head, and it is the east point. Therefore, Cain can be said to rule Aries and Libra axis as the demiurge or Tubal Cain, the lower state of consciousness. He is the architect, the lamesmith, the governor, etc., the builder of Hiram. Abel does not die. He descends into manifestation or earth, not hell. It just means it's more, tangible. This, of course, is death to the spirit for a temporary period. So the analogy it's trying to refer to is this idea that Shakti energy, sexual energy, creative energy has 2 ways of being expressed. It can be expressed here on earth, physically, through giving birth to your child, not you giving birth to your child, your woman giving birth to child, or you can raise that sexual energy up to procreate on a spiritual level. So Cain of earth and Abel of heaven. So this individual concedes that they've been doing a lot of research on Eastern sciences, which I believe, again, are very, very potent and powerful, and they've known this stuff for thousands and thousands of years. And they include the subtle body, not just the physical part that you can cut with a knife. Really key to understand the terminology they're using here. The subtle body. The energies are very, very subtle. You can't become acutely sensitive towards them if you don't practice things like pranayama and deep states of meditation. You need to go into different states. They're not accessible on the beta state of the mind, meaning you're more high frequency. You need to slow it down. You need to get into things like theta, or even higher states of gamma. And that's where you can start to access and become acutely sensitive towards subtle energy. So subtle body. This is where the West is lacking terribly. I agree. The West is starting to admit these facts. Ayurvedic science is over 5,000 years old and is the science of life. The yogic science, and it is a science, is thousands of years old and is also only shunned in America because of money and control by the powers that be. Then you have the ancient Taoist knowledge and the Chinese medicine, which I believe aren't far behind either. Once you start to read into the information, especially around Ayurvedic, Vedantic, Taoist teachings, you recognize that, and not just reading, but practicing what they're talking about, meditation, breath work, energy work. The Western medicine lens of things is always trying to sell you something that you already have access to. And it doesn't do well for their bottom lines, fundamentally, to have you be in full self-government of your health, your energies, and your own success. So that's the motivation behind it. You can call that conspiracy. I just call it fact. The Eastern countries have learned to stay healthy long before us and have mapped out complete human form, energetic and physical, long before us Americans or Western culture came along. Don't be ignorant or brainwashed by the materialistic money and power-driven agenda by the West, where they push antidepressants, Zoloft, and anti-anxiety medicines instead of teaching people how to control their lives and minds. Yeah, look, there's once you understand the reality of something like the economy and the financial essence of life. I mean, it's like war, for example. War is a business. It's actually advantageous for there to be war. It's actually, health is a business. It's actually advantageous to the business of health if people get sick and don't know how to control their health. Of course it is. If everybody was healthy, if there was a utopia we were living in this earth, then war budgets, war doesn't exist. Healthcare industry topples overnight. Here they promote illicit material, masturbation to clean the pipes. That's where they get all ages hooked on prescription painkillers based on opium, which is heroin. This is an interesting analogy between some of the Egyptian law and Indian law. The third eye, the thalamus, the eye of Horus. Here you have the pineal and pituitary. So the pituitary actually is your third eye. The pineal is the seventh chakra. That's the masculine, and this is the feminine. And this third ventricle here is filled with CSF, cerebral spinal fluid. And many people believe, certain scientists believe, that this area here is consciousness, is everything. And it is the fluid of CSF which bathes the masculine and the feminine aspect of the energy centers, is the unification of consciousness, the rising up of consciousness. The life force in the body is called prana, energy. The prana body feeds the nervous system and the immune system and every system in the body. The vital energy that makes sexual energy is stored in a subtle state in the entire body, including the blood, bones, flesh, muscle, nerves, etc., which gives us energy to indulge in various day-to-day activities. Pranic energy in this state is integral with the entire body, in a state of harmony and union. The body is generally geared up and in availability of life force to perform action efficiently. Based on the kind of activity we indulge in, life force flows to that particular part to perform the action. I believe a more scientific lens to view this, which might be more palatable to your reasoning, would be nervous innervation. When you think about a particular part in your body, let's say your big toe on your left foot, right? Immediately as I say this, your attention starts to go to that area and you have greater sensitivity in your big toe on your left foot. And that is nervous innervation. Where your attention goes, your energy flows. And in the same way, if you want to move Shakti energy from the pelvic floor, bring your attention and energy to the pelvic floor, to the structures around the pelvic floor. And then if you breathe with vigor and intention, you can move the nervous energy up the spine into the CSF, so electricity into chemical, and it starts to circulate around the whole nervous system. And you can actually start to move different assets of energy from the pelvic floor into different plexuses, which are stored in the ganglions in those plexuses. More often than not, it's stored in the solar plexus, which the Taoists coined the second brain, because it has the most nerve endings, I believe a significant number of nerve endings in the body. I think only maybe second to the actual cortex, the brain, the gray. So with intention, you can move the energy around these centers, or prana, or ki, or chi. This has been known across those cultures for hundreds of thousands of years. And I suppose, again, the language and vernacular we use is nervous bioelectrical energy. There's different examples here about marathon runners using the intention in the legs, boxers in the arms, chess players in the mind, so on and so forth. And when man is under sexual excitement, his life force is withdrawn from every part of the body and focused in this particular center. What's really interesting is if you still struggle with continence, celibacy, in moments of relapse, you will notice that there is a big shunting of all resources from all areas into that particular area. And it is so potent, it's so powerful, it's so tangible. Reason why is it's a energy center. It's you've got some of the most potent energy in that area, and you're going to be acutely sensitive, pardon me, to when you activate it. Life energy, which is earlier in a subtle state of amalgamation with blood, flesh, bone, etc., in the subtle state separates from those regions to a large extent and flows into this area. The prostate gland gets ready with the prostatic fluid, the Carpenter's gland is ready, geared up for this act. This is further to all his prana being in a state of sexual focus. In this state, man cannot efficiently indulge in any other activities other than the sexual act. So its allocation of bioelectrical energy is the easiest way to explain this. In the same way, there's a reference here to wet dreams happening because usually before sleep, the individual is fantasizing, is sending all this nervous energy into these areas. He's then moving into theta and then delta brainwave, and he's gone into this hypnotic state, this very subconscious, suggestible state, with all that nervous energy in the areas which are used for expelling the energy, not for keeping and transmuting the energy. Sexuality is everywhere you go. Everything is based upon sex here anymore, and this is the new normal. It's the sad truth. Most people have lustful thoughts, so all of our prana force is going into this area. When one leads a life of true celibacy, mind and body, conserving all his vital energies, transcending it from a normal state into a higher state, from earth into heaven, through yoga, I've said before, meditation, asanas, pranayamas, mudras. His prana becomes very subtle in nature. Its intensity increases to a great extent. It's akin to gross water being heated and converted to superheated gaseous steam in a distillation plant. It's a really good analogy to show that there's, again, a transformative aspect to this energy. Curious question here about Tesla, Einstein, Da Vinci. Was their brain bigger in volume, or were dormant centers just more activated because there was more CSF, more prana, more subtle energy from Shakti energy being converted, or pranic energy being converted into ojas? It's an interesting question. Perhaps these are theories, perhaps these are facts. There's a lot of research still to be done, but I will bring you it as always. Speak soon.